just another example of people here in our church family that have found out what it looks like when you serve other people, what it does to you, what it does through you. And we're going to continue talking about that today as we continue our series, All for One and One for All. And I got to kind of ask you a question to think about. You can't really answer it out loud, but think about it. What is the vibe at your home? Because that's the one place you control it the most. Hopefully, you have a vibe at your house that's kind of relaxed and friendly and encouraging, and you're kind of behind each other, you're with each other, you're for each other, all those kind of things. But then you contrast that, for those of you that work, especially if you have to go into work, you kind of contrast that with what is the culture like, what is the vibe like where you work? And the reality is there are some bizarre HR policies out there, and there's kind of some really crazy rules and really kind of just stuff that nobody would think makes sense. And I want to give you a few of them that I found out about. I hope that your workplace is not like this, because like I said, these are just bizarre HR. These are actual policies that are in place in certain companies. And so there's a Norwegian insurance company named NBD. And at NBD, if you go to the bathroom and you're away from your desk for longer than 8 minutes, a light starts flashing in the office area that you've been gone for too long to the bathroom, which is a little embarrassing. I'm like not sure what they're trying to do, but that's kind of crazy. And not to be outdone, there's a call center in Ohio that had put on their kind of company interweb, that had put posters and signs up, that had put in their employee handbook something you would think you wouldn't need to specify, but it said no machetes allowed in the workplace. Okay, don't know what happened, don't know why they have that rule, but obviously something. The worst one that I saw was for the city of Detroit. People that work for the city in Detroit, now they have since changed this, was a really good idea, but they said that no person is allowed to wear scented products of any kind, including deodorant. And I thought, man, that stinks, pun intended. It's just a terrible workplace. And then here's the capper. In Japan, this is still legal in certain Japanese companies. They can actually measure the waist size of employees. And if a male's waist size is more than 33.5 inches or a female's waist size is more than 35.5 inches, you can be fired because your waist is too big. Nobody else seems to think that's odd. I think that's really weird. Like, why can you do that? And you know this. You've been around a while. You've worked enough jobs. You've been in enough places. You know why they have these rules, don't you? Because somebody, somewhere along the line, did something stupid or brought a lawsuit or hurt somebody else or did something crazy, and they had to come up with these kind of kooky rules like, okay, you're not allowed to do something that you would think everybody would know you're not allowed to do. But for some reason, we have to come up with these rules. And they're not very helpful. They create a weird culture. But the reason I'm talking about that is because not all the rules are bad. As a matter of fact, you have created some rules in your own life, too. There's kind of these go-to things that as you have learned, as you have lived, as you've experienced things, you try to create these personal rules for this is how I handle things. This is how I navigate life. And I'll give you an example of one of mine. I mean, when I was a young college student, I can't remember which semester it was, maybe my first year, or maybe my first semester, my second year, whatever it was. I got all the lists of the syllabuses of what we were going to be doing that semester. And as I looked at them, I realized something. Nothing was due in any of my classes until the end of the semester. So I was like, all right, this is going to be a good semester. I don't have to do anything. I got plenty of time, no rush, no worries, no nothing. And you can already see what happened, right? It bit me, right? At the end of the semester, it was kind of like, oh my goodness, I have to do a whole semester's worth of work in like a week. And it was awful. And I created a rule, and I'll be honest with you, I stole it from a movie. I can't remember the movie, the line, but I stole this line and I kind of made it a life rule. And the line was very simple. Do what you need to do now so you can do what you want to do later. And I really took that on. And if people that work with me and people that are around me, they know I love to get things done early. I like to have stuff done out of the way, checked off long before it's due. That has just become kind of a life rule for me. And you have the exact same thing. So what are some of your rules? Like I always, I will never, When this happens, I always keep you've got some life rules because it's probably, hopefully not, but probably the same reason I do. You messed up. It bit you, it cost you, and you realize, there's got to be a better way. I don't want to do that anymore. Or it happened 3 or 4 or 5 times, and you finally realize, no, there's got to be something better. I got to make a change because I don't want to be stuck like that again. Now, every once in a while, we get a life rule that comes from somebody else. Like they learned the lesson for me, right? I don't have to pay the dumb tax. I can just kind of benefit off of what they already figured out. But for most of us, most of the time, it comes from something we did, something we learned the hard way, and we realize, I don't want to live that way anymore. And we create these rules, and they work in every aspect of life. You have financial rules that you live by. Like every time money comes in, or every time this bill, or every time we do this, or whatever, I'm always going to do that. You have health rules that you live by about what you eat and your exercise and what you're doing and all those you create those rules. You have relationship rules. And those of you that are married, I'm going to pick on the married people for just a minute. You have some rules in your marriage even, or any really close relationship that you have that help you navigate that relationship. If you're married, I read a couple of really good rules. The first one was, we're not going to compare our marriage to anybody else's. Doesn't matter what anybody else is doing. Does this work for us? Another great marriage rule was we are not going to fight to be right. We're going to fight to love. Like we're not going to fight to be right. We're not going to argue like that. And then the last one I saw was really great was, when in doubt, I give the benefit of the doubt to my spouse. I give the benefit of the doubt to my spouse. Those are great, great, great relationship rules. The point is, you create them all over your life. And we're going to look this morning at a guy who created a rule of life that, frankly, is very short and seems a little odd. His name was Peter, and if you want to track with us, in 1 Peter 5, he writes this rule down. But you kind of need to know what's happening. It's about AD 65. He's sitting in a Roman prison. He is awaiting, most likely, execution. He knows he's going to be killed. And so, in some ways, this is kind of that last letter, right? If I could just tell you this one thing before I die, here's what I want you to know kind of stuff. And so he writes this letter, and he's encouraging his friends, and he's reminding them of things. And then he tells them, oh, by the way, there's this rule that I have. And I think it would be so great if you would adopt it, because I learned it the hard way. I paid the price for this. You don't have to. So here it is. And it's so simple. Like I said, you hear it, and you're kind of like, what? His rule, pride must be killed. Pride must be killed. Which kind of sounds strange. You're like, well, pride's not good, but, I don't have to kill it. I mean, how is that a life rule? That doesn't really seem like that's going to get you very far if that's the rule that you live by, that you navigate life with. But let's look at how he explained it. In 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 5, he tells us the rule that he adopted. And it's a little bit longer. It's a little bit more dramatic than pride must be killed, but it almost kind of seems like it's over the top, if you will. He says it this way. He said, in the same way, you who are younger, submit yourself to your elders. And then all of you, clothe yourselves with humility towards one another. And he gives a reason. He says, because God opposes the proud, but shows favor to the humble. Kind of the result of that, humble yourselves, therefore, under God's mighty hand, that he may lift you up in due time. Cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. And then he ends it. It's so dramatic. Verse 8, be alert and of sober mind. Your enemy, the devil, he prowls around like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour. I mean, that's pretty much as dramatic as you can get. You have an enemy. He's not just working against you. He wants to kill you. He wants to devour you. And out of all of that, he comes up with the rule, pride must be killed. How does all that work? How do you get there? I mean, it just seems so out of context and out of the norm. And it's like every other rule of life. It's like the rules of life that you have. There's a backstory. There's a backstory to all of this. How did we get here? And it happens in John 13, if you want to look there. Because in John 13, we kind of rewind the clock about 35 years from when Peter was sitting in that prison cell. And he's a totally different guy at this point. He's a young guy. He's actually been one of the early followers of Jesus. He was kind of early in on this whole Jesus movement thing. And he kind of, because of his personality, because of his charisma, just who he was, he kind of became a leader of those early followers. It was still a pretty small group, but he was kind of one of the acknowledged, unofficial leaders. I mean, Jesus was the leader, but Peter was kind of a leader in the movement. And they're getting ready to go into the city of Jerusalem, which for you, you're kind of, it was a big deal. Jerusalem for them was the most important city. That's where everything happened that was religiously important. Everything happened that was socially important. Everything happened that was economically important. It all happened in Jerusalem. Everything in their life centered around Jerusalem. And they were heading to Jerusalem. So this was a big moment, but maybe even better than that, because they had been to Jerusalem before. Something was different. Jesus was incredibly popular. He had a lot of power. Like he could just say something and people were responding. And he had kind of positioned himself that I think for Peter and a lot of those close followers, they felt like, this is it. I don't know what's going to happen, but something big is about to go down. There's a lot of energy. There's a lot of juice around this trip that's different than all the others. And as they're traveling, they can just kind of feel it. I don't know what's going to happen, but I know something is going to happen. We're at a tipping point, and things are going to change in a big, big way. For Peter, this was huge. I mean, he was a poor young fisherman from a small town, an out-of-the-way place. And here he is, riding into the capital city, walking, but you get what I'm saying. He's rolling into the capital city, and he's with Jesus, and he can just feel it. And on top of that, it's Passover, which again, if you're not Jewish, doesn't mean a whole lot. But for us, it's a big holiday. It's like Thanksgiving or Christmas. We're going to get all the family together. We're going to eat. We're going to celebrate. It's going to be phenomenal. So for Peter, he knows something's about to happen. He gets to celebrate this all-important holiday with the people he really cares about. Tonight, we're going to eat and celebrate and party, and maybe tomorrow, Jesus is going to kick off whatever it is he's going to do, and I get to be front row and center, right in the middle of it. He's got a lot of anticipation. And then everything changes. Then, in that dusty little room where they're getting ready to celebrate, probably by candlelight because it's dark. They're getting ready to eat. They've got the food on the table, and it's just like your house when you get people over for Thanksgiving. It's almost time. And Jesus does something nobody expected. Out of the blue. Nobody could have called this. Nobody would have expected this. It was just odd. It created some tension, and nobody really knew what to do with it, and everything kind of changed from that point forward. There was still some energy, but it was more nervous energy, not excitement. There was still the sense that something big was happening, but it was a little bit more tense and uncertain than it was a positive thing. Look with me in John chapter 13, verse 2. It says the evening meal was in progress, so they're eating, they're having a good time. And the devil had already prompted Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, to betray Jesus. And Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power and that he had come from God and he was returning to God. In other words, Jesus knew who he was. So he got up from the meal. He took off his outer clothing. He wrapped a towel around his waist. After that, he poured water into a basin. And he began to wash the disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. It is hard to put into words how odd this is. If you work at a big company, this is like the CEO coming down to the bus stop across from the company to clean the clogged toilet. Like, that just doesn't happen. Nobody does that. Cleaning feet was nasty. They lived somewhere where it was hot, like it is hot here. There were no paved roads. Everything was dusty. So everybody is always hot. They're always sweaty. It's always dirty. They're always walking. Everybody wears sandals. There's animals everywhere, and there's the stuff that animals leave behind everywhere. And so your feet get nasty. It wasn't about just being nice. Like, oh, this is a nice, hospitable thing to do to wash people's feet. Because when you eat, you tend to recline on your side. And your feet either go next to the person that's sitting beside you or goes next to the table. This is nasty stuff. Like, I don't want somebody's nasty feet next to the food, and I don't want them next to my face. And so it was important to wash feet. But here's the thing. Nobody did this voluntarily. You can imagine, it was a horrible job. And as Jesus gets up and they see what's going on, I don't know if you've ever been in that moment, where you're watching something play out and you're just kind of like, your eyes get big, your mouth drops, you're like, I can't believe this is going down. This shouldn't be happening. I'm surprised, I'm shocked, I don't know what to do with this. I'm just kind of, I'm just watching this happen. It's exactly what these guys were doing. They realized what was going on. He got up, he took off his jacket. He wraps the towel around, like, what is he doing? Is he getting ready to, he fills water in the basin. He is, he's going to wash off. He starts moving towards him, and I can imagine just through their heads all the things they were thinking, all the questions they're questioning themselves. Man, I should have done that. I should have washed Jesus' feet. I can't believe I didn't do that. Or why didn't John do this? He's the youngest one. It's supposed to be him. It's whoever's not important is supposed to be the one that washes feet. And they're kind of begin to process all this stuff all at the same time, and they're blind. They're blind to the spiritual significance of what's going on. The crazy part of this, the only people that were aware of what was going on was Jesus and Judas. everybody else was so caught up in what is going on here. Why are you doing this? And Jesus begins to wash their feet. He takes their sandals off, washes their feet, dries them, puts their sandals back on, moves on to the next guy. And apparently, in awkward silence, because as far as we know, nobody says anything until he gets to Peter. And here's the backstory. Look what happens when he gets to Peter. Verse 6. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, Lord, are you going to wash my feet? Jesus replied, you do not realize now what I'm doing, but later you will understand. Jesus had a much better idea of what was going to happen to Peter than Peter did. No, said Peter, you shall never wash my feet. And Jesus answered, unless I wash you, you have no part with me. Then, Lord, Simon Peter replied, not just my feet, but my hands and my head as well. And Jesus answered, those who have had a bath need only to wash their feet. Their whole body is clean, and you are clean, though not every one of you. For he knew who was going to betray him. And that's why he said that not everyone was clean. In a way only Peter could do. He showed false humility and pride all at the same time. No, you can't wash my feet. Oh, you insist? Okay, well then wash all of me. I want the whole thing. He's like, I'm going to tell you, Jesus, how to do whatever it is you want to do. Again, just so blind to the spiritual significance of what's happening. Jesus says, you're clean. You are clean. Because of the love that I have for you, because of the humility that I'm showing you, because of my willingness to serve you, because of the sacrifice I'm going to make, because, Peter, you're right, something big is going to happen tomorrow. But it's going to happen on a cross. And it's going to happen as a sacrifice. And because of that sacrifice, Peter, you will be clean. Peter, you and everybody else in this room are going to be clean. And Peter, everybody that you share this story with later, if they believe, they will be clean. And you and I, if you follow Jesus, will be clean because of what happened that next day. He was right, something big was coming, but it wasn't what he thought. Jesus is sitting there and he washes Peter's feet. And he washes Judas's feet. And he washes all of their feet. And you can see it just playing out. It's quiet. It's awkward. Peter did what Peter did, and I'm sure the rest of them were like, that's why I didn't say anything. It didn't work well when you kind of pop off to Jesus and tell him what he needs to do. He puts everything away. He empties the dirty water out of the bowl. He hangs up the towel. Puts his jacket back on, and he comes and sits down. And he asks and answers a question because he didn't want him to miss it. Look what he says in verse 12, He says, when he finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and returned to his place. Do you understand what I've done for you? He asked them. You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that's what I am. And now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you should wash one another's feet. I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. Very truly, I tell you, no servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent them. Now that you know these things, you'll be blessed if you do them. If you do them. He's telling them, and he's not going to give them the opportunity to miss it because they've missed stuff before, just like you and I have. We've heard things before. Somebody's tried to show us something, teach us something, whatever, and we're kind of like, I think I got it. And then we're like, oh, no, I didn't. I guess I missed it. I did it wrong, whatever. Jesus doesn't want to take any chances. He's saying, you saw what happened. Do you understand what I'm doing? This is so much deeper and bigger than feet, right? There's a whole lot more going on here, and I don't want you to miss it. Jesus tells him, Peter, do you get this? Because any one of them would have washed Jesus' feet at a second's notice. None of them were willing to wash each other's feet because that would have meant you're more important than me. You're better than me. You count more than I do because everybody knows the only people that wash feet are the people that don't matter. And Jesus just flips it on its head. He says, it's not really that way. Let me ask you a question. If you were in the room, maybe he's washing your feet. Maybe you're just sitting in the corner watching all this play out. What would you think? I mean, what would your takeaway be as you see this happen? As the God of the universe takes off his jacket, sits down, picks up a nasty foot, takes a sandal off, knocks the dirt off, begins to wash it and dry it, and put a sandal on and do the other foot. How do you, and it wasn't just one. He did it 11 more times. What would you think about that? I mean, it's in a way it is. You get it. You get why it's so scandalous. And it's so impactful. And for Peter, it was one of those moments that changed everything. It was a life lesson. And that life lesson was very simple. Put down your pride and pick up a towel. And he never forgot it. Put down your pride and pick up a towel. Now, if you're a follower of Jesus, my bet is that you'd be quick to wash Jesus' feet if you were in that room. You've been happy to do it anytime, several times a day. Whatever you need, Jesus, I'm happy to do that for you. And you know what he says? He says, no, I'm going to wash your feet. And the order here, don't miss this. The order here is so important. He says, I'm going to wash your feet because I want you to know what it looks like to be loved by God, to be served by God, to have God humble himself, to express that love to you, to know that God loves you that much that he is willing to sacrifice himself and save you. I want you to know what that is, what that feels like, for a very important reason. Because I want you to turn it around and do it for someone else. Not out of guilt, not because you're trying to be a nice person, not so you can check a box or be a good church member or a good citizen or anything like that, but because you have been so filled because of what God has done for you that your first response is to put down your pride and pick up a towel and do it for someone else. You see, now, it makes so much sense. That explains it. That's why this was burned into Peter's memory. I mean, like laser engraved into him. I mean, he was in that moment. He learned that life lesson, and he saw this. He saw that his pride had kept him from loving others. He saw that his pride had kept him from serving others. It had kept him from creating a sense of belonging for others. His pride had kept him from keeping the commitment that he made, that he would stand with Jesus. His pride had kept him from abiding with Jesus, and his pride had been used by his enemy to try and ruin him. And now, all of a sudden, it makes so much sense that somebody like Peter would say, I have this rule in my life that pride has to be killed. I can't stand it. I can't put up with it. I can't have a little bit of it. It can't be a little of this and a little of that. It has to die. It's a spiritual thing. I was clueless to all the spiritual stuff that was happening, but now I see. Now I know. I get it. Pride is like this spiritual monster, and it ruins things, and it ruins people, and it's going to ruin me, and my enemy will use it against me, and so I have to kill it. It's all I can do. Oddly enough, Peter wasn't the only one that learned that lesson. The man who wrote about half the New Testament, his name was Paul. Paul learned that same lesson, different circumstances. But he sums up his life lessons in Galatians 5:13, and he says it this way: serve one another humbly in love. Kind of the opposite. Peter, pride has to be killed. And the opposite, Paul, serve one another humbly in love. But it makes me ask the question, why serve? Why is serving the answer to this? I've got to kill pride, and I've got to be humble, and the way I do that, or at least the way Jesus says to do that, is by serving other people. Why is it serving? It could have been anything. Why is it serving? Here's my answer, at least. And it happens physically some of the time when you serve people. It always happens internally when you serve someone. Serving forces you to lower your head. Literally, physically, often when you serve somebody, you have to bend down. But you know exactly what I'm saying. When you decide to put somebody else first, especially when you don't want to, especially when it's something hard, you kind of have to lower your head, don't you? Because you can't put yourself first while you're trying to do this for them. It just doesn't work. We're not smart enough to hold two things like that. We either have to make the decision that it's really about me or it's really about them. And if I'm going to serve them, I have to kind of lower my head. You come first. Right now, right here, in this moment, in this situation, you're first. See, serving, it forces us to lower our head And like I said, you can do it in any kind of example or any kind of situation, but serving lowers my head and expresses love from the heart. And again, I know I picked on marriage just a minute ago, but marriage is another perfect example, but any close relationship, this works. You have to ask yourself the question. Think of the people you love being around, whoever it is, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a close friend, a spouse, whatever it is, whoever you love to be around. I got a question for you. When you scrape away all the stuff, is the relationship to make you happy or to make them happy? And by the way, if your answer is, well, it's kind of both, that's code for it's about me. And I know you're arguing with me in your head right now, and you're like, no, that's not really true. I mean, it can be both. Is it about making me happy or is it about them? Because if it's about them, I'm going to put them first. And here's the secret sauce, and like I said, I know I keep talking about marriage. Here's the secret sauce in marriage. When you get two spouses that look at their life this way, that my relationship with you is about putting you first, and your relationship with me is about putting me first, all of a sudden, marriage is everything it's supposed to be. That's exactly how it's supposed to work, but it works in every relationship. And that's why Peter is saying, here's a rule of life. Clothe yourself with humility. Serve one another in love. This is the rule of life. And it kills pride. And Jesus said, blessed, favored, loved by God are those who accept, agree with, believe, assent to. No. Blessed are those who do this. And that's the challenge, isn't it? Because nobody would argue with that, right? I mean, who's going to really argue? No, you shouldn't put other people first. No, don't humble yourself. Don't love other people. Don't do that. Nobody's going to say that. The challenge and the blessing are in the doing it. And so here's what I know. I tend to be kind of give me 3 steps and I want to do it and I'll put it into practice and I'll make a change and I'll put it on my schedule and my calendar and all that kind of stuff. But here's what I found about trying to live this rule out. And I've been trying for a while, and I do it with some levels of success, and then I fall back. And then I kind of do it again, and then I fall again. And so it's an ongoing kind of thing. It's not one of those deals where you can check it off and, okay, I got that one done. But here's what I have found, that it happens more internally first, way before it happens what I do with my hands, or where I go, or where I spend my money, or any of those things. And so a couple of quick things about this. The first thing I've noticed is you've got to turn off the autopilot. You got to turn off the autopilot. And I'm guilty of this as anybody. I'm just busy like you are. And so there's things you got to do and places you got to go and people you got to see and you got to do this and you got to do that and you got to be in this place and then you got in that place and you're going to do this. And then when you get home, you got these things and da-da-da-da-da. And it's so easy to go into autopilot mode of just, I got to get stuff done and I got to take care of these things and these people and then I got to get through today so I can do next week, so I can do next month. And it's just on and on and on. And we live on autopilot sometimes, not realizing that there are spiritual things going on around us all the time. All the time. There are spiritual opportunities, there are spiritual encounters that are happening every time, and I know this is kind of hard, blows your mind a little bit. Every time you encounter another person, there's a potential for that to be a spiritual thing. Not just somebody I walk by, or somebody that I sat next to, or somebody that I work with. You got to turn off autopilot to get to that point where you can say, you know what? I'm going to kill pride, and one of the ways I'm going to do it is I'm going to be paying attention to the spiritual things that are happening around me. Second thing. You have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. My yoga teacher taught me this, and when you get old like me and stiff like me, you have to go to yoga so that your body doesn't hurt all the time. And so my yoga teacher taught me this saying, and she probably got it from somewhere else, but she says, you've got to get comfortable being uncomfortable. You're going to have to stretch uncomfortably to where you can sit in a chair and be comfortable. It's just that you got to do that. And it works with serving too. You've got to get comfortable being uncomfortable. Because here's the deal. It is uncomfortable. When you look at your schedule with not enough time and too many commitments, and on the other hand, here's how I want to try to help and serve people, that is uncomfortable because there's a tension there. It is uncomfortable spiritually when inside you really want to. I want to serve. I want to help people. I want to pour out into other people, but I also don't know if I can. I don't know how. I don't know if I've got the time, or I don't really think I could help, or I feel inadequate. There's a tension there. It's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable when Jesus taps you on the shoulder and he says, I want you to wash their feet, metaphorically. He says, I want you to wash their feet. And you think to yourself, but they're not going to be thankful, and they might hurt me, and they may not appreciate it, and they may even betray me. And he says, that's okay, wash their feet anyway. It's uncomfortable. So we have to get comfortable with the idea that serving other people means my life is going to be a little bit uncomfortable. And that's okay. Last thing, final thing, And Peter said it so well. We have to kill the ugly pride. Nobody would say, oh, I'm too good for that. I can't serve people. I'm so far above that. I can't spend my time on somebody like them. I can't do that. Nobody would actually say that out loud. At least none of you would. But so many times our pride squeaks out in other ways. Well, I don't really have time. It's not really the right season. The kids are, and it's really busy, and it's probably not a right fit for me. I'm sure somebody else could, and it feels like that's something that maybe down the road I could get engaged with, maybe possibly whatever. And our pride just seeps out, and it blocks off all those things. And here's why it's so important, because we end up in the exact same spot that Peter did. We end up looking around and saying, wait a minute. My pride, it leaked out, and it just killed the opportunity to belong with others. It killed the opportunity to abide with Jesus. I so want you to get this. I so want you to understand this, that your pride is the thing that holds you back. And while nobody wants to say, I am prideful, when we are not willing to embrace this servant life, what else is it? And it kills so many things. And like Peter learned, we know this is a spiritual monster, and it has to be killed. And the way you kill it is by serving one another, humbly, putting other people first. It kills it every single time. And I got to tell you, I am so glad to be a part of this church, because in this church, I see so many people that have literally done that have picked up the towel and said, it's not about what I want. It's not about what I need. I'm going to put other people first. And it's such a beautiful thing when it happens. And as more and more of you embrace this lifestyle, you know what happens? The world around us notices. Why are you washing each other's feet? Why are you washing the feet of your neighbor? Why are you putting them first? And it captivates them. And they don't know what to do with it. They don't have a category for it. They're just kind of stunned by it all. And what happens is, because Jesus has loved you so well, it's enabled you to love others. And they don't know what to do with it. And in the middle of their confusion and in that attention-grabbing moment, Jesus begins to work in their heart. And because you are so for them, Jesus uses that to bring them back to his Father. And it's such a beautiful thing to see. It kills your pride. And Jesus uses it to bring other people back to God. That's why this matters so, so much. So I want to thank you for being that church, for being the people that pick up the towel. Let me pray with you. Father God, thank you so much for Peter's story, for the life lesson that he learned. God, I pray that you would help all of us to embrace it. God, we know it. So many of us, we're working hard to live it out, but we also stumble and we fall short and we mess up. And so, Father, I pray that you would give us the courage to step into this, that you would remind us of how incredibly, deeply, fanatically you love us. And from that, we would have the strength to serve, to put others first, to kill pride, not because we want to be good people, but because we want to walk with you, Jesus. It's in your name that we pray. Amen.